Our first keynote for today is Congressman Mark Takano. Mr. Takano represents the people of Riverside, Moreno Valley, Jurupa Valley, and Paris at the United States House of Representatives. It's indeed an honor to have him here this morning, knowing how busy this season is for congressmen, and for him to come in person, we appreciate. Just a quick background for Mr. Takano. For more than 20 years, he has worked to improve the lives of Riverside County residents, both as an elected official and as a teacher at Rialto High School. Born and raised in Riverside, Mark's commitment to public service began at an early stage. His family roots in Riverside go back to his grandparents, who, along with his parents, were removed from their respective homes, sent to Japanese-American internment camps during World War II. After the war, these two families settled in Riverside County to rebuild their lives. Mark attended La Sierra High School in the Alvord Unified School District, and in 1979, he graduated as the school's valedictorian. Mark attended Harvard College and received his bachelor's degree in government in 1983. As a student, he bussed tables to help make ends meet. During his senior year, he organized a transcontinental bicycle ride to benefit the International Development Agency, Oxfam America. Upon graduation, Mark returned home to Riverside and began teaching in the Rialto Unified School District in 1988. As a classroom teacher, Mark confronted the challenges in our public education system daily. In 1990, he was elected to the Riverside Community College District's Board of Trustees. At RCC, Mark worked with Republicans and Democrats to improve higher education for young people and job training opportunities for adults seeking to learn a new skill or start a new career. He was elected board president in 1991 and helped the board and the district gain stability and direction amid serious fiscal challenges. In 2012, Mark became the first openly gay person of color to be elected to Congress. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mark Takano.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you. It's a privilege to join this incredible group of educators and leaders today at this year's California State University San Bernardino Educational Leadership Summit here at Cal State San Bernardino. Let me put this down here, get rid of it. And I want to give a special thank you to President Morales for joining us, and to Dr. Shinaka Domochuku. Thank you for that kind introduction. The Dean of Education here at the School of Education, and a warm, and I want to thank you for the warm welcome. So, you know, though I live in nearby Riverside, and that commute, I mean, I used to commute to Rialto High School, has gotten longer and longer. Oh my God. And so I'm pleased to visit San Bernardino again, home of the Meatla Cafe, which originated the ground beef taco. This beautiful San Bernardino is the homeland for many of the culinary delicacies we enjoy today, because that ground beef taco was the foundation for Taco Bell and Del Taco. And many of you San Bernardino folks know that it was also the home of the first McDonald's, right? So Taco Bell, Del Taco, McDonald's. Did you know that you were in the birthplace of it all right here? And of course, when I often would try to take my half-hour teacher lunch, I would try to rush over sometimes over to this part of San Bernardino where they had the original Juan Pollo, which in my opinion is way better than Pollo Loco. So, but I just violated an ethical breach there. I'm not supposed to really promote businesses as a congressman. Well, so many of you know that I am also the chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. Cal State San Bernardino has become a destination of choice for many student veterans because of your excellent programs in national security and cybersecurity. And you have, I was saddened to hear that your vet center was flooded, and I hope that gets taken care of soon. But really, so many veterans have come to use their GI Bill here at this campus because of the welcoming environment, and I want to congratulate this university for doing that. And you have really great work that your scholars are doing on political extremism. You have one of the great experts here, quoted often in national media. So I want to begin a conversation with you all today by acknowledging the painful economic realities of this moment. Our country, like many countries across the globe, is experiencing record inflation in the wake of COVID. While millions of Americans face economic hardship and funding for teachers and education is slashed further in many parts of our country. Those who stand to benefit from a change in the control of Congress and the White House blame rising inflation on the American Rescue Plan that was essential to keeping America's families afloat during the pandemic, instead of rightly attributing inflation to supply chain disruptions, corporate profiteering, and central bank intervention. Meanwhile, Republicans have absolutely no agenda or intention to address inflation. Their attacks on our education system are an attempt to incite cultural outrage in the absence of substantive policy solutions. So I stand here today as a former teacher and educator, like many of you, and I don't think I need to tell anyone here that we are at a critical inflection point that could reshape the educational landscape in the United States for generations to come. Well, even before I became a teacher, I long recognized the importance of community colleges and public universities and the opportunities they afforded students of all backgrounds. Pursuing my passion and becoming an educator only solidified those beliefs in me. For over 25 years, I taught classes not too far away in the Rialto Unified School District and later concurrently served as an elected member of the Riverside Community College District Board of Trustees. It was clear then, even then, that the important role that education played, higher education played in the lives of both young people and adults seeking new skills or seeking to chart new careers. The pathways that community colleges and public universities provide to diversifying our institutions and bringing fresh perspectives to our society have historically led to the remarkable thought leadership and academic achievement that our country is always known for. But today, that diversity of thought and the heart of our education system is under assault. Just this last week, the Supreme Court began to hear oral arguments in two politically motivated lawsuits: Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, Students for Fair Admissions versus the University of North Carolina, two cases that directly challenge affirmative action in higher education. A group known as Students for Fair Admissions, an ironic title, if you ask me, driven by special interests and a radical political agenda, is pursuing ambitious goals to undermine racial justice and diversity within our education system and our society. I'm going to tell you that as an Asian American graduate of the University of California, Riverside, and Harvard College, I firmly believe that I benefited directly from affirmative action, and I'm proud of the opportunities these policies create for students of color, countering the burdens of past and ongoing racial discrimination. And while the Supreme Court should continue to affirm race-conscious policies, which are integral to campus diversity and closing educational gaps directly correlated with the long-standing effects of systemic racism, I, like many others, do not have faith that this court will do what is just or what is right. This court is radical And the evidence is in the way that these justices flagrantly disregard precedent to achieve their desired political outcomes. And I strongly object to Asian Americans being used as shills to create racial divisions in this country. Amid this fight, governors are choosing to weaponize state power to punish detractors of legislation aimed at dictating how and what teachers can teach in schools. Education, something as basic and fundamental to our progress as a society, is being weaponized to wage war against social issues and political discourse on topics such as sexual orientation and gender identity. The Don't Say Gay legislation that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed earlier this year is a powerful example of how state power is being wielded to silence diverse viewpoints, even going so far as to retaliate against private businesses like Disney that took positions on these issues. In October of this year, 33 members of Congress, my colleagues, introduced sweeping Don't Say Gay legislation to influence instruction, events, and literature in any federally funded institution across the United States. At the local level, school board elections, once considered down-ballot races, are now highly contested fights in states across the country to install individuals sympathetic to harnessing our educational system for political and social aims. In my own home state of California, highly competitive races are underway for control of local school boards. Initially in response to COVID restrictions, now to dispute issues of gender identity and racial equality, and later to shape entire curricula in schools to accommodate political aims. Conspiratorial claims about critical race theory are being wielded as dog whistles to justify attacks on our education system. And with my own county, just across the county line in Riverside County, extremist school activists have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for these local school board races. In states like Tennessee and Texas, book burnings and book bans are becoming more commonplace, once emblematic of rising European fascism and authoritarianism in the advent of World War II. Now, a stark reminder that radicalism is alive and well in our own country. The implications of these developments for discourse and diversity of thought, without fear of retribution or violence, should be deeply alarming to everyone in this room and to any American who longs to remain in an open and free society. The truth is, our schools have never been more diverse, our education system more expansive than it is right now today. Yet there is a concerted movement underway right now to put a straitjacket on educators and limit this diversity of thought in our schools. We cannot stand by idly as this happens, and we won't. The global COVID-19 pandemic upended our lives as we knew them and wreaked havoc in communities across America. No neighborhood was immune from the devastating effects of closing schools or forcing families to adapt to the reality of remote learning. Students, parents, teachers, and administrators alike all felt the grave consequences that the COVID-19 pandemic would bring. The effects of the pandemic are still being felt today, and our ability to cope is still being tested. Let us remember that over 1 million of our fellow Americans perished, and we cannot underestimate the lingering effects on all of us. So in response, Congress took swift action by passing the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which invested more than $120 billion to ensure students and educators could return to the classroom safely and permanently adapt to this new environment. This landmark legislation included funding to reduce classroom sizes and implement social distancing guidelines, purchase personal protective equipment, hire support staff to care for students' health and well-being, and make infrastructure improvements such as updates to air ventilation systems in school facilities. School districts in our own area took advantage of this funding. I know, I talked to Moreno Valley Unified School District and Riverside Unified School District. Millions of dollars went to improve HVAC systems, and you know how terrible our summers can be. This bill further included $40 billion for institutions of higher education that struggled to make up for lost revenue following campus closures and struggled to stay afloat. The American Rescue Plan further required school districts to reserve at least 20% of its ARP ESSER allocation to directly tackle the issue of learning loss. Everyone here understood very early, the seriousness of learning loss, and in September this year, national test results confirmed what we all feared. American school children fell behind during the pandemic. These funds would combat learning loss by focusing on evidence-based tutoring and expanded after-school and summer programs targeting enrichment to closed achievement gaps. And much of this reserved learning loss funding even went as far as to purchase new learning equipment and millions of dollars of new books for classroom purposes. Additionally, after the horrific school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, congressional Democrats, at the urging of the American people and President Biden, passed and delivered the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which included significant student mental health funding, $500 million through the School-Based Mental Health Services Grant Program to increase the number of qualified mental health service providers to students in school districts with demonstrated need. I've already begun to talk to my school superintendents about getting prepared to submit applications for this money. The federal government's proposal to advance even greater reforms to our educational system were captured in the President's Build Back Better proposal. Now, the Build Back Better proposal represented an ambitious suite of potential reforms to our education system that could have been transformative. Build Back Better aspired to deliver on massively impactful reforms such as $45 billion to cover 2 years of community college for students, $9 billion for HBCUs, TCUs, and MSIs, $550 more for the maximum Pell Grant, while expanding federal financial aid to include individuals with DACA, TPS, and DED status, $500 million for retention and completion grants, $650 million to address the teacher shortage, and universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds. Imagine what would have been possible. Congress painstakingly developed this proposal in partnership with educators and stakeholders such as you to craft policy that reflects not only our diversity as a nation, but aims to prop up students and faculty to improve educational outcomes nationwide. The cost of college does not end at tuition and fees, as we all know. Textbooks, living expenses, reliable internet access, and food are all expenses that must be covered by students while pursuing their education. In a high cost of living state such as California, we have seen students forced to utilize food pantries on their campuses just to get by. I've been a staunch advocate for free community college and have witnessed firsthand the great impact of the California College Promise program, which covers the tuition of the first 2 community college years for those eligible. It is also of paramount importance that increases to Pell Grant funding continue to develop. The stark reality is that it has never been more expensive to attend college, and the Pell Grant is a critical piece in assisting low-income students financing their education more with grants and less with debt. The value of the Pell Grant has been declining in recent years, and students who truly need the assistance are finding themselves with less purchasing power, and I've been an ardent supporter of doubling this benefit. The Build Back Better Act aspired to achieve these transformational reforms for higher education, but ultimately succumbed to partisanship and concerted efforts to roll back social progress. The compromise found in the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, enacted this past August was a shell of what it could have been. We ended up with IRA instead of Build Back Better, and instead of meaningful support for students called for in Build Back Better, the IRA settled on modest programs to assist schools with addressing air pollution, tax credits for solar installations on campuses, and aid to transitioning fossil fueled power buses to get them out of school fleets. Now, listen, I don't want to curse the darkness, but move toward the light. The Inflation Reduction Act is by all accounts an historic investment, but it was whittled down due to the partisan fighting in Washington. Frankly, the opposition of Republicans. What we stood to gain under the Build Back Better proposal was a true and thorough attempt to invest in our social infrastructure and level the playing field for those seeking higher education opportunities. And yet the political reality led to the IRA as a compromise that, while important, does not fully meet this moment. And look, give me 2 more senators and let me keep my gavel, we'll get this done. Did you hear my call? Give me 2 more senators and let me keep my gavel and we'll get it done. The Bipartisan Infrastructure, let me talk about the BIF, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment Act, or the BIF as it was commonly referred to, was signed into law by President Biden earlier this year. This was hailed as a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation investment in infrastructure and competitive sectors. Indeed, it was much bigger. It was bigger than the interstate highway bill that was signed by President Eisenhower in the 50s. It's a huge achievement. In the United States, 1 in 5 miles of highways and major roads are deemed to be in poor condition. The BIF authorized $110 billion to repair those bridges and roads alike, while duly investing in reliable, high-speed internet. In this day and age, broadband internet is absolutely vital. Access to the internet is necessary for individuals to do their jobs, to access remote learning, to conduct telehealth visits, and to stay connected in the digital age. Yet, as many Americans reside in areas where there is no existing infrastructure to access high-speed internet, there's many parts of the country where it's not possible. The BIF addressed this reality head-on and delivered $65 billion to broadband infrastructure deployment to help close the digital divide. And I can tell you, this relates to us in my community. I have the Sherman Indian Institute, which is a residential boarding school for Native American children from all over the country. And I heard really, really compelling stories just 2 weeks ago when they told me that their experience of the pandemic was that they couldn't access broadband from the Native American lands where they had to go back and return to. And look, it also affected our area as well because the bipartisan infrastructure bill and its investment in broadband also provided more subsidies for low-income families to access broadband in our very own communities. Now, another critical piece of legislation passed this year was the CHIPS Act, the CHIPS and Science Act. It similarly emerged as a watered-down version of the America Competes Act. The original comprehensive package intended to invest boldly in our nation's research institutions, manufacturing capabilities, and tech sector. It was revealed as a response to the Senate U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, or USICA. The House version, Competes, proposed climate change alleviation efforts and sought to remove caps on green cards for STEM field graduates pursuing doctoral degrees. However, the CHIPS Act does in its own right create meaningful opportunities to expand STEM education across multiple academic institutions, from funding for rural schools to community colleges to HBCUs. The CHIPS Act provides opportunities for K-12 teachers, particularly in our elementary and middle schools, to introduce STEM and STEAM curricula to previously unexposed students and pique their curiosity in a ripe field for diversification and exploration. In order to build the STEM workforce, CHIPS allocated $13 billion to educators in the forms of scholarships and fellowships. There is also a specific language geared toward those residing in rural areas to get involved in STEM education, providing teachers with the resources they need to instruct effectively. While falling short of the original House-passed bill, the enactment of the CHIPS and Science Act does prove that bipartisan agreement is still possible, and from it we can carve out policy that benefits our children and supports our nation's strategic development and growth. Compromise is inevitably what happens in Congress, but we must clearly demonstrate our values in terms of what is possible if we retain the gavel and gain 2 more senators. And here's where your involvement in this fight for true transformation is so critical to achieving these broad policy goals. Our nation's educators, our schools, and our students are under assault. The environment today is one that is less friendly and less conducive to robust education and less free of biases and political motives that influence our children's learning. It is an environment that is faced with a high court that is poised to reshape our society through politicized rulings as an elected, unelected, appointed body. The integrity and diversity of our institutions are being systematically commandeered to pursue political ends and reverse decades of social progress. There are people in our country who want to allow the incumbency of privilege to stand. I say this is not what our country is about, and how we as educators and stakeholders and as citizens respond to a repudiation by the Supreme Court of affirmative action will define our future. It is not an option to let this incumbency of privilege to stand, to bow before the powerful forces attempting to reclaim a status quo antithetical to the vision and promise of our nation. Attacks on our schools and educators, limits to free speech, curricula are being weaponized to meet political ends, and the undermining of our children's educations. This is all what is at stake. We all have a collective responsibility to preserve the freedom for educators to truly serve. Truly, there is a civic duty for us to commit to this fight. Not only do the institutions of today rely on our efforts, but their future as well, as we prepare to inspire students to serve as tomorrow's leaders and thinkers. So I say to you, we need a revival of education and social reform that I would like to attribute to educator and philosopher John Dewey in the building up of our schools and civil society. Leaders in education are needed to instill in our students the values of civility and problem solving necessary to elevate the political thought of our nation. In this fight, both the present and future rest in our hands. Our education systems must reflect democratic principles and mirror the egalitarian society we strive to build. We are gathered today for this summit 8 short days before the midterm election. And as we enter this pivotal moment leading up to the election, it is crucially important that we all exercise our right to vote and elect strong representatives who can uphold our values and protect the integrity of our institutions. In this election, the threats to our system are eminently present. The future of education policy is on the ballot, and our ability to deliver candidates that will stand up for K-12 and public education systems rests in your hands. The voices you choose to sit at the table determine who shapes education policy for your children and the children of others. So I want to thank all of you for your service in this great field. Education is one of our noblest and most challenging professions. I have tremendous respect for those who dedicate their lives to the service of others through education, as you have done. Thank you for your continued support and partnership in this fight for educational equality, and I encourage you to take this summit to internalize the ideas shared and expand your network of colleagues and peers as you renew your commitment to fight. Now more than ever, we all depend on your ability to stand up to the powerful voices or powerful forces intent on destroying our education systems and further our democracy. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Best wishes for a very successful, informative, and compelling conference. Thank you very much.